thank you for coming along. Today is one of those days that just happen in local government. An opportunity has presented itself for us to find out a bit more about a company from overseas as we're going through a process with power generation, trying to work through something for our communities right across the Fleurieu. I'd like to introduce you to, Shane Wood, who's the Australian representative for the company Zen Appollo. The special guest is Cherie Zhang from Beijing, who operates from China. Unfortunately, Cherie's got to disappear pretty quickly, so we thank her for her presence. The company really deals with solar projects, wholesale and energy storage, etc., which is what our Fleurieu Peninsula group are starting to look at. We're a long way off of going that far as yet, but it's always good to get information on what's available. I'd like to introduce Mike Smoke if he wants to say a few words to introduce formally Shane. Yeah?
Sure. Just sorry, I'm Mike Smoker. Recently retired out of the solar and energy generation industry in Australia, but long-term resident of Victor. The circumstances came about because Councillor Andrews and Councillor Charles had approached me about the opportunity for a solar farm, perhaps using the site of the old dump up on Waipinga Hill, and at the same time, just coincidentally, the community energy program is being considered also in Victor Harbour, because Shane and Cherie and Shane happened to be here. Then they took the opportunity to come down just to scope the area and have a look. Experts in energy generation across the globe, and are now gazing their quite considerable eyes at Victor Harbour and see what opportunities present here, and also just to make people aware of the type of generational plant and opportunities that can present either through their company or other companies in this space. So Cherie being their manager out of Beijing and Shane being the Australian manager here out of Brisbane happened to be available today to come here. So there was short notice, but seeing it's topical, it's a great opportunity to welcome them to our district and for them to say a few words, and there'll also be some interaction which they'd appreciate after a short presentation. So we'll hand over to Shane and off you go.
Great, thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. I thought it would just be a coffee chat and a couple of people around a table, not cameras, microphones and a big audience, but thank you all for coming along today. I've just put together a bit of an overview of the type of business we are, what we do, and a little bit about some of the things that we have in our capability. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of an overview of that, and we have to get Cherie back to meet a plane to meet Beijing, so we have to be out of here on time. But if I can get through it quick enough without jibber-jabbering too much, we might get time for some questions and answers. Just so you know, I'm not an electrical engineer. They all work for Cherie, but I'm really just sort of scouting around and finding appropriate places for us to do our investments, and that's why I'm here. So that's going well. Okay, so a bit of an overview of our company. That's probably a bit too small to read. Effectively, we're developing renewable energy projects across the world. In a nutshell, we have renewable energy branches in Australia. We have 2 branches, Perth and Brisbane, so east and west. Also in Beijing, obviously, which is our major area, as well as Singapore, and also in Canada and Toronto. So we have a few branches, so we have a global interest, but the renewables energy business that we work for is just a part of our greater financials business. So we have a very diverse range of companies. Okay, this gives you a little bit of, I might just run you through some of the history of where we've come from. So we started in 2001. See if I can get this pointer to work. So that started Beijing office here. We then started the Pacific Securities business in 2007. That's a financial securities business of which we're the largest shareholder of. It's a publicly listed company on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. and you know, so you can check all the details of that out. But it's one of our big money spinners for us. We founded the Australian business in 2010 out of the Perth office. That predominantly became just a wholesale business was the main model there. I started somewhere around 2012, and we started the projects division back in 2012 with just a couple of people. And through the wholesale business, we rose to a fairly lofty position particularly in the Western Australian market. We had a strong presence, not so much on the East Coast. In 2013, the investment business started over in Canada as well, in Toronto. That's now diversified to owning property as well as renewable projects and things like that over there. So it's got a few things going on there. And then we started the American business, was founded in 2014, and 2015 we listed on the NASDAQ with SPAC. That's actually an important part of your understanding where we're coming from in this presentation. So a lot of people kind of go, well, if everything looks so good and blah, 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 what do you guys get out of it? We're a financial business. Apart from renewables, we own Bank of Lao, we own property. We've got downtown property in Perth, Toronto. We've got golf courses. We've got investments in real estate. There's a very diverse range of investments that we have. But the most recent one is our acquisition of this SPAC company. That's a Special Pacific Acquisitions Company. So that's an acquisitions business. That's listed on the NASDAQ. So where we build our assets, and this is where the renewable business ties in, when we build our assets, the long-term view for us is to have those long-term investments so that we can take those assets and fortify and develop our presence in that NASDAQ market. So where the money goes and our investment is looking towards prosperous times in the NASDAQ in America. So that's how it all kind of links together. So I thought that was relevant to let you know. Okay, a few different things that we do: on-grid and off-grid systems, energy storage solutions, combinations of photovoltaic and energy together, microgrid systems. I heard that word thrown around this afternoon since I've been in the room. Peak demand reduction, load shifting, we can use that with batteries and storage. We do solar power purchase agreements. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that. That's a financial tool that we use. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we can do utility scale solutions. And we're currently looking into the FCAS market, which is involving large scale batteries with supporting the network, the energy network with large storage and the benefits that we may be able to get out of that. Okay, the type of customers we typically work with, a lot of commercial and industrial companies, particularly with our microgrid type systems, behind the meter systems, and also with our power purchase agreements as well. Mining customers, again, microgrid stuff, and then we're also working with Western Power, Ergon, Energex, people like that, developing solutions for their networks, because the proliferation and expansion of solar has created a number of problems for the energy networks. So they now have varying views of how the solar market, renewable energy market, fits into their scheme. So we're a bit of a thorn in the side for them, actually. And also with land developers and local governments. Hello. Okay, so why are we at Victor Harbor? My very, very brief research shows me that you're the 7th largest community in South Australia, and with the largest growth rate of 29%. The demographics lead me to believe that it's an area that wants to control its cost of living. A lot of people come here that want to, spend some time and live a low cost lifestyle. I believe you're going to have future constraints on the network. I believe you already are having some constraints on the network, and with that population growth added into it, it's going to make life more difficult for SA power networks and also for the residents of the area. So I think there's a brewing problem already existing. It's got the suitability for medium-size solar model, I guess, renewable model, and it's high energy costs. So all of those combine to having good potential for us in the investment sector. So it looks like it could hit a few sweet spots for us and for all of the stakeholders. Okay, so I guess if we start there, we've got to look at what the community needs are, and I probably would extend that into the needs of the network and everything as well. We work closely with talking to Energex and Ergon in Queensland, my home state, about some of the constraints and problems that they're having and where they want us to go and where they don't want us to go. Don't go here, go there. And I believe that NP would be in or PN would be in a similar situation. We have to look at what the technical requirements are for solutions. So first of all, we have to understand the solution. What is the technical requirement around that? That's where we have to go back and do some thinking. And then we should hopefully come out with some community benefits out of that. And for ourselves, obviously, a feasible investment opportunity. Okay, so just having a look at some of the different stakeholders that we have to deal with in the whole mix of what you're doing within an energy program. On the generation side, obviously there's us, and we have to make sure that everything makes sense financially, engineering-wise. That's pretty important for us before we hit the green buttons and we'll start spending money into any situation. You've got the AEMO that's involved, Australian Energy Market Operator, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term. Then you've got the ASOCA, which is your, I can't remember that acronym, but they have to basically license us as well. Yeah, you've got SA Power, the state government obviously, and obviously there's property owners involved. So we actually have to put the project somewhere. And on the other side of it, or joining all of that up, is the really important part, is the retailer. And that's an interesting area for you to go through your community development and looking at who can retail and who can take the advantages of a renewable energy project and who can deliver those, and can they deliver benefits to the community. So that's a very interesting sector that all on its own. And on the consumption side, obviously there's governments, large commercial consumers, not-for-profit organisations. So there's a number of people you need to consult with to get these projects up and running. So it's certainly not a quick process, and it's quite a technical process as well. But it all starts on days like today. Okay. Some of the common models that have been used in the past in community power, donation model. All of these models seem to have different restrictions and advantages. The donation model largely depends on donors, and that can sometimes be limiting because of the number of donors and the size of the donations are made. What capacity of capital does that bring to the table to be able to invest in a community program? And there's a lot of consideration around that. And then you've got your community investment model. So that's again where you go around and raise funds out of the community. This has been done a number of times in Australia. There you start to get into governance issues and shareholders and obviously those people that are investing money, they're investing the money so that they can get a return. So you start to get a few tricky questions getting raised when you start to go into those models. And again, you're dependent on the number of investors in those models and the amount of money that they can invest as well. So it does put some constraints around the size and capacity of what you can do with that type of model. You've got your community and developer partnership, which is probably the one we're closest related to. where there's potentially mutual benefits and potential for co-ownership in say, one of our investments. So there could be a separate company made up of, say, our corporate capacity, as well as other investors and shareholders that may be interested in being part of that. So that's one model, and that, I guess, has its own set of governance issues, but it does probably allow us to pour a lot more money into such a project. So it gives us a bit more capacity to do a few different options. Then there's community council partnership. That normally works in the way that the community will go out and want to drive a project, and they'll get together and they'll come cap in hand to the council and say, how can you guys help us out? And that may be land assets, or it may be help with building approvals, or it may be a number of different things that councils can assist them in that program. And council maybe contributes and takes some benefits out of that energy as well. And then there's the multi-household type scenario, which I believe has been done before, where you can get together a whole pile of residents and you might get a list of 100 people that all want to buy solar systems, and you can use that buying power to negotiate a very cost-effective option. There is some new stuff coming of peer-to-peer technology. I don't know if has anyone heard of that before? Yep. So peer-to-peer technology is still a little way off. We're actually working with one of our business partners in Queensland that is getting pretty close to having that cracked, and is working with one of the big multinational developers to roll out a peer-to-peer project. So it's not quite there yet, but that's something that we've got our eye on as well. So it may be advantage people that don't have a suitable roof for a solar system can still share that energy, buy from the neighbours that can. So that's the developing and emerging market. So we're keeping our eye on that space as well. So there's no one way of doing a community project, I guess is the point of this slide. There's lots of different models and there's lots of different ways to do it. Some have been more successful than others. But we're probably not so involved in doing a lot of community projects directly. So this is, I guess, just a snapshot, and I'll just take you through so you understand some of the technology that we're talking about that we are capable to do. So obviously your solar storage farms. These days, just plonking a big acres and acres of panels down doesn't really make a lot of sense because of the rate of power that you get for selling that power is very, very low. There's a lot of government risk at the moment through the federal government with where they sit, where they position on the renewable energy target is very, very low. So a lot of the investment incentive to just do a solar farm is, it's a very high risk area for a very low return product. So the investment potential looks better when you start to add things in like large scale batteries. And of course, South Australia is the home of the world's largest battery, I'm told. So the other option that we're doing more of in Queensland than anything else at the moment is behind the meter commercial customers. This can actually deliver at the point of that property a larger saving on power for that property owner, but it doesn't necessarily take those benefits beyond the meter. And in circumstances like that, we could put in a $200,000 investment that we would own the asset and just sell the power back to that property owner at an agreed rate. And that would save them money. That offsets the 36, 38 cent power that they're buying. That will bring the quickest return model financially and the lowest cost and fastest transition period to benefit, but that just benefits that individual site. We do have an Australian Energy Regulator's licence to do solar power purchase agreements in South Australia, as well as Queensland, New South Wales, ACT, South Australia and Tasmania. So we also have the option for residential people options as well. So there is a residential model there. So that's something that we're working quite hard on at the moment in North Queensland, Queensland. Storage in the FCAS market. Frequency control is a really big issue for controlling the voltage fluctuations and keeping everything running tickety-boo. That's an Australian term, Sherry, tickety-boo. So there's a new and emerging market in that space. That doesn't necessarily even require that we have any solar panels involved. That could simply be a case of when there's very low loads on the transmission line, say between midnight and 4 a.m, we can store our batteries from the grid. And when that peak time comes between 4 and 8 o'clock at night, when the stress and strain is on the network, we can soothe it and smooth it and take the lumps and bumps out of it and keep it running more smoothly. That will in turn reduce the cost of those network provisions. So this is a new space that we're looking very carefully at. I've spoken about the solar power purchase agreement residentials. Bulk buy packages is simple. Our wholesale business is our own brand, our own product. Sherry spends a lot of time in China sourcing product for us that we bring in. We are the deemed importer, we own it. The responsibility for warranty and ongoing everything lives with us. But we take out a level in the supply chain that makes us a pretty cost-effective model. So effectively buying from us is virtually like buying factory direct. So certainly, you know, we'd be interested if anyone's get enough people together. And Sherry's big thing for the future that she's quite keen on is a virtual power plant. This is where we can basically take all the power from our batteries that are scattered all over Queensland or South Australia, and then we can share that power and collectively their little generation sites, so we can move that power around and sell it at different rates. So it's not just the old solar panels on the roof thing anymore, is it? It's much more than that now. Okay, so this is probably some of the models that may be suitable for the area down around Victor Harbour here. So in this case, we've basically got your solar farms. They go through inverters and then in through the transformers. Then we step them up from DC into AC here. They can go back out into the grid. Likewise, we can do a similar thing with batteries. They go through a power control system, back through step-up transformers, back out and become part of the network effectively. Those two things could be combined, obviously. The big thing for us, I guess, is we're reliant on, it's great that we've got money that we can go and build these things, but it's actually really, really important to us that we can actually survive after we've built these things. So the big issue for us is how do we set up a retail arrangement that allows us to effectively recover our investment costs over time and to cover the maintenance and all those sorts of things. So having a retail contract is good. What we're seeing now is that big energy users will quite often, banks and things like that will say, oh, we're going to be 100% green power, and we can take all of our generation and we can have an agreement with a retailer in the middle that would sell it to those people, and they're getting the benefit, we're getting the benefit. So there's a bit of work to be done around how we actually recover our investment. It's one of the difficult things with the big farms. The other big issue is that we're getting a great deal of uncertainty with the NEG. If anyone's heard the Network Energy Guarantee, if anyone's heard of that, federal government position. I don't think anyone really understands it well enough to cast a judgment whether it will or it won't work, but I won't make my personal views made in this forum on that one. Yes.
Can I, look, one of the questions that I have is that the distribution lines, the transformer, etc., is gold plated and it's for the next 90 years via ADL. in South Australia, as I
Yep.
understand it. And how do we overcome the gold plating, if I use the terminology, of them taking it from here and putting it there?
They're working with the network providers is really, really important because they can make or break your situation. And no matter which state you go to, they have one clear objective. We want to control and supply quality power to all of our customers. That's their only agenda. Making it the cheapest way of doing it is probably secondary to that. And particularly in Queensland, we get hit with big heat events and we'll get several days of massive loads. And we have to gold plate it and build all this capacity in that sits there idle for 350 days of the year, and then 6 days a year that stuff kicks in. But it's got to be there when you need it. So it's hard to reverse that once you've built that in. What we're finding now is that as we grow in our populations and as we spread out, that those demands are getting bigger and bigger into certain areas. So they have to upgrade. Now, what we're doing in Queensland with the network providers there, they're actively talking to people like us to say, what can you do to invest in a certain area that will delay us spending $10 million or $100 million to upgrade that transmission line? So we have to look for those opportunities to help them not spend the money, and they need to be cooperative to us in an extent both ways so that they make it they create a pathway, I guess, for us to be able to achieve that. Microgrids are a really good option. Taking stuff behind the meter is a really good option, but they don't always like us doing that either. So you have to take each situation on a case-by-case basis. So their only objective is to maintain the quality of their power. And if we come along and disrupt them, they will slap us on the wrist and tell us to go away. So it's very important that they're engaged in all of this. So I'm not sure if that directly answers your question, Peter, but
I understand what you're saying.
yeah. So it's hard. It's a hard one to reverse. Once that genie's out of the bottle, it's a little bit hard to unwind those costs. What we can do with things like frequency control and those sorts of things can help them control those costs somewhat. So, and we are seeing the effects of that, and the big battery has helped with that. I was reading a little report on that the other day. So batteries are probably a bigger part of the solution for the network than solar. Solar's a problem for them because it's making all of the power when they don't need it. It's giving them the power at the wrong time. Wind gives them power in a different way. So it's about being able to maybe take all that power during the day when they don't need it, store it into a battery and let them have it when they do need it. And that's the smart. We have to be smarter now. It's not just to build a big farm and sit there and collect the money at the gate. It's not really that simple anymore. This is another option. This is kind of our microgrid solution. So this is where we can start to, I guess, find those isolated areas, and we can have our own system and push power back up the line. In this case, we've actually got, yep, the red light's still going. There I am. I'm a terrible shot, aren't I? So we've got our solar, we've got our inverters, we've got our charge controllers, our batteries, and then we can go back through our AC side here, and then behind that we've got a generator. What we've actually done at our Brisbane office is a small microgrid. We've been running off the grid for 3 years. This is very similar to us. In our case, what we have instead of a generator, we actually have the grid set up, so I don't have to worry about the diesel or anything like that. So we have, there's a couple of shots of it, but we've got a 120 kilowatt battery and 60 kilowatts, and our inverter is 160 kVA. So yeah, we've been running off the grid. So we can do that, but at a bigger scale. Everything we've got's scalable. So it doesn't get any more difficult, we just scale up. But I see this as being, for the really isolated networks, particularly into the regional areas, This looks like it'll be a great solution. That's some of the projects we've done in China. So over there it's very different. There's a 5 megawatt one there. You'd have to be happy doing that one on your roof. So over there we have to pretty much contain ourselves to rooftops. There was a big gigawatt project that we were involved in, but even China now is having the similar problem. They're making too much power through renewables during the times they don't need it. In certain areas they're actually sort of saying, we don't want your power now, turn off, shut down, go to 50%. So even over there with the massive loads they have in certain areas, they're restricting the ability of just a straight out solar farm. That's our roof at our office. So that was a quick, easy job to do. Back in the day when we put those batteries in, Ergon and Energex weren't too interested in us. We didn't even have to actually apply to put this in, which is really good. So, but it is the lowest cost of energy. There's projects I'm doing up in Queensland at the moment for commercial businesses where we're offering those customers energy off the solar system for around 16 to 18 cents a kilowatt hour. That's offsetting probably the 26 cents or 22 cents that they're paying up there. So there's no reason those sorts of numbers aren't achievable in your area. Obviously there's a little bit more with logistics costs or whatever, but certainly in the sub 20 cent area is quite possible for us to do that. And that can be done over, our commercial contracts will go up to say 20 years. So the longer term that you lock in, the lower, it's a bit like a mortgage. You want to pay it off over a shorter period of time, then the repayments become higher. Same sort of thing with what we're doing. So that's quite a popular option that could fix a lot of individual businesses with their problems pretty quickly and with minimum fuss. And the other thing is we actually guarantee the energy rates with that model as well. So if we've got a 10-year project, we'll normally put in only a 2% price increase through. So if you start at 18 cents, go 10 years at 2% price increases each year, you'll be lucky to crack the 20 cent mark after 10 years. And that's all locked up in a bona fide contract as well. And we can do it without any upfront costs. So apart from the fact if you get to a roof and there's holes in it and rain's coming through it, obviously we're not going to put a 25-year asset on a 25-hour roof. So there may be some cost by the building owners to make their building into a position where it's suitable to accept our asset. But other than that, for the actual hardware, the inverters, the installation, there's no costs. There's a few of the smaller projects that fit into that SPPA model that I was telling you about. That one there is a little bit of our battery room that we've been running. We've got 296 batteries in that room, 120 kilowatts of power. And for about 10 months, I ran the air conditioning and all of the lights, day, night, weekends, public holidays. We turned nothing off and still got zero bills. So we've taken it easy on the system now. We actually turn things off at night. Neighbours must have thought we were horrible, leaving the power and the lights on every night. But anyway, so that's a good exercise. If anyone's ever in Brisbane, you're more than welcome to pop in and have a look at it. So to give you an idea how that PPA model works, these are based on Queensland numbers, but effectively with an average 5% increase across a 20-year period. I use 20 years because it's a useful life of a solar system. You could potentially see your price go like that. With ours, with a 2%, 1.5 to 2% increase, you can see how flat it remains. And we also have the option of ownership at any point along that line. But after 15 years, we'll generally hand the asset over so that all of the savings that come out of it can be achieved by the owner of the. We change the ownership. So in that case, that was a 37.5% reduction on their energy costs. Obviously, I think those numbers would be quite different here. Yes. time. Okay, time to move along. Skip that. A few of the other things. With the PPA model, it frees up cash flow for business as well, so they don't have to put their hands in the pocket or wait for grants. Protects the business from rising electricity prices. So there's a number of financial benefits that fit into that model. We do all the, it's all the yes, 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 yes. Operation and maintenance, we do repairs, we do positive cash flow from day one. You're just getting cheaper power. Unlike the normal model where you purchase something, you've got to invest the capital in first, so it could be 4 or 5 years on a commercial job before you get your money back. We cover the insurance, monitoring, and we take all the ownership risk with those models as well. Okay. This is something interesting that potentially looks a little bit Victor Harbour-ish from what I can see there in the background as well. But that's a project that was over in Washington State with one of our partners did that. So 1 megawatt, 4 megawatt hours. So we can deliver a megawatt of power for a 4-hour period. So that's used in conjunction with the utilities over there. And that's potentially the sort of stuff that we can roll out here. That particular technology is flow technology. It's a vanadium technology. It's some of the latest stuff that we're capable to do. Unlike lithium batteries, you don't have the recycling and end-of-life issue. So it's a very, it's a liquid-based solution. Basically, you empty the containers every 10 years. That all goes back for recharging. Refill them, and away you go. That gives you very predictable energy. Unlike your normal lithium batteries that you see in your phones, that when you first buy your new smartphone, it'll be great. You can run it for 2 days, you don't have to recharge it. And after 6 months, you've got to charge it every day. And after about 2 years, it's got to live on a charger, otherwise it doesn't work. Lithium depletes. This technology doesn't deplete. If it gives you 100% output at year 1, it'll give you 100% output at year 15. So it's very exciting technology. It's all containerised and it's got unlimited cycles. So it all works on a chemical reaction. So that's one of the really interesting technologies that we're very focused on doing something with in Australia. So potential outcomes. I guess what we look for in terms of the council that we're here in front of today, maybe we can help some planning resources that are going to help meet your future requirements with minimal impact on ratepayers for building all of that infrastructure, and it will show good financial and environmental stewardship as well. So I think there's lots of good reasons why a council would want to do something, an environmental project. No matter how you shape it or do it, there's some definite positive outcomes for council. For us, it's all about that NASDAQ at the end of the day and proving our financial performance in that space. But also, we don't necessarily want to start with the world's biggest project or anything like that. We want to start with projects that are fit for the purpose. So we're just looking for those scenarios of where those problems exist, and then we want to build in a solution around that that's appropriate for that particular scenario. Community obviously gets some benefits out of it, and for SA Power, they may be able to defer those upgrades. You have Kangaroo Island here, which is very similar to a few island situations we have off Queensland, where one of the islands in Queensland is looking at to upgrade the power because of the growing community there, is looking at hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade the submarine cable to support that growth, which is a big issue. That's a lot of money out of the taxpayers' money. We can maybe offset some of those things with those microgrid type scenarios in conjunction with the existing. So what we want to do is take some pressure off at the back end off the network. Put downward pressure on the network costs. We're seeing that starting to happen with some of those batteries. And obviously they want stability of energy. We can give them stability of energy. Okay, so what do we hope to gain from, I guess, coming to Victor Harbour and doing this exercise around the peninsula? Gauge the community interest, developing an understanding of SA power networks, which I'll be spending a bit of time researching in more detail tomorrow and on Monday. Understanding your energy costs. I believe it's a very complex structure that you have in South Australia. And obviously try and meet with some people back in Adelaide and around the community that have an interest that can assist us with understanding our environment that we're working on and the feasibility of this project. And then Sherry and I will conduct a bit of report writing that all goes back to Beijing office, and they say, oh, that looks interesting, continue. Or no, that doesn't look interesting, look somewhere else. I think from what I'm hearing, all the indicators are there that this is an area that could benefit from renewable projects. And I think that might be the end of my slide presentation. So thank you very much.
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.